Today, we're exploring how AI is reshaping our cognition, creativity, and sense of self with one of the most compelling Gen Z voices in the tech conversation. Welcome to Happiness on Tap. I'm your host, Leann Herron, and today's guest is Ayush Prakash, a Montreal based creative director, philosopher, and leading Gen Z voice on the social impact of technology. Ayush is the author of The AI for Gen Z: What Digital Technology is Doing to Our Brains, Our Future, and the Generation Coming of Age Inside It. Ayush brings a rare mix of philosophical, deep, and hands on AI experience. His work explores how artificial intelligence and emerging technologies are reshaping cognition, identity, and society. So stick around and you'll learn how AI is challenging the way we think and feel, what it means to have a digital identity shaped by algorithms, and how we can stay human in the age of artificial everything. Ayush, welcome to the show. I am so excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Leann. Listing all of those things, it feels peculiar to live in a time where we're asking these questions. It feels more science fiction than science reality. So excited to get into it.
I am as well. I'm excited to learn so much from you because, like I mentioned before we started recording, this really isn't my area of any real expertise other than doing my best to kind of keep up with the technology as it advances and grows and to not fear it, to really learn its capabilities, its restrictions, and what we need to do as humans to make sure that we're not overusing this type of information. So like I said, I'm so excited to learn more from you. So we'll get started. Ayush, you describe Gen Z as the first generation raised inside this digital technology rather than within it. What does that distinction mean, and how does it affect how we think and relate to the world?
Yeah, it's really a great starting point. So Gen Z and now Gen Alpha as well are the digital natives, let's say. And the easiest way to understand who they are and how they think and why they think that way is just to consider other generations up to the millennials. You all had a childhood that didn't involve technology at the forefront. Now, you had a childhood that involved technology. There's this thing called the Walkman that I've heard about. Obviously, I'm being tongue in cheek, but, these were technologies that were, very ubiquitous in society, but they were not your portal into society. That's a very important distinction. When you were using the Walkman, you were not getting your understanding of reality from that device. It was a tool, it was something that you used to listen to music, right? But for Gen Z, and now especially for Gen Alpha, for the younger people, I think the oldest Gen Z are around 28 years old. But when we were growing up, we didn't necessarily have a childhood that didn't involve technology as our portal into society. So, what does that portal look like? It looks like Facebook. It looks like YouTube. It looks like Twitter. It looks like Snapchat. It looks like Instagram. It looks like TikTok. It looks like Vine. It looks like Reddit. All of these different things where it's not just using the technology to get news or to watch YouTube videos. It's also using technology to talk to my friends. It's using technology to get into group chats. Now I'm having to have different relationships. Like there's literally a bifurcation of my reality between physical reality where I have the physical relationships that I can see and touch versus the relationships I have online. And sometimes, as we all know, people that have played video games and such, you have friends across the world that you've never met before, but that you're still super close with. You can have inside jokes. And so this type of bifurcation of reality at the genesis of somebody growing up is what Gen Z and Gen Alpha grew up within. And so when we're talking about AI for Gen Z or growing up in digital technology, we're not just talking about having TVs in every room. Like it's a good example, but it's not the example. We're talking about what does a group of humans look like when they are using something that is unprecedented, hyperstimulating, and fundamentally extractive from when they were 5 to 10 years of age. What does a group of humans look like when they are using social media as not necessarily a tool to engage with others or to post silly cat memes, but as an understanding of their own personality, an understanding of their own social status? What does a group of humans look like when they are engaging in politics from not the physical town square, but from the cyberspace town square? How does that group of humans look like when they are engaging in social media, getting into politics, and then starting to get different algorithms? And so they're getting polarized in different directions and getting different realities forced onto them from 10 years old. The reason why I bring up age is not necessarily to identify the generations, but it's because humans, as we're growing up, our brain starts to mature around 25 years of age. And so as we are growing up, a lot of the um a lot of the processing, a lot of our ability to understand the world happens between, between 2 and 25. And so if a lot of our understanding of the world comes in from an extractive and fundamentally hyperstimulating technology, that is the question that when people 500 years from now, if we can survive for that long, ask, how did it how did the internet and how did digital technology change humans? Gen Z and Gen Alpha are that answer. And so that's the spiel at the start.
And that is so fascinating. Well, I'm a parent. My oldest daughter is 37, my son is 28. And watching the changes in technology, even between the two of them, with my daughter, cell phones were just kind of getting going when I was pregnant with her. So 1989, I had the big brick cell phone. Then I was able to get a regular cell phone because since I did have a little one, I was out and about more in a car away from the house, working full time, needed to get a hold of daycare providers, that kind of stuff. What I didn't realize as she got older and entered her teen years was how much more she knew about the technology than I knew. I didn't find out about texting until I got a bill from my cell phone provider for almost $400. And what it showed was, she was texting all night long, and we didn't keep our cell phones in our bedroom. We would plug them in the kitchen downstairs, thinking that was a good place where we wouldn't be disturbed in our sleep. We wouldn't have the screen technology. We didn't have TVs in our bedroom. That was always something I've been adamantly against. Um, but she was, as a teenager, getting up and going downstairs and texting her friends all night long. And so I was hit with this reality of a technology that I was already behind the ball on and not really understanding it. And so that was my first real idea of the difference between us in my generation and wanting to be outside and doing things with our friends and not wanting to be in the house versus her generation of being more homebodied or wanting to be attached to technology than being outside with friends. And then my son, with him, he grew up very digital age, so I watched him grow up playing Minecraft and having the fear of not being able to control who he was talking to on the other side, no matter what they sounded like or their screen name or their image, but knowing that there are predators out there. And my son was in scouting, so he'd have all his fellow Boy Scouts come over to the house, and their cell phones were to be kept by me away from them unless there was an emergency. I wanted them to be kids and interact with each other and go ride bikes or work on bikes outside. but not be attached because the first time I walked in the room and I had 8 boys that were all holding their cell phones, texting each other in the same room. I was like, "Oh, no. No, you all need to talk to each other. You're already losing that disconnection." And then seeing the changes in technology as they went to school. And now with my grandson, they live on tablets in classrooms. Here in New Mexico, kids aren't learning cursive handwriting. They're learning how to live in that digital technology time. And so it's a big adjustment for my generation. And that's why I, was really excited for our conversation was to learn so much more from you, and your knowledge and your history. And I'm just so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. One of the things that I want to get off my chest first is it's not your generation's fault. It's not anyone's fault that this happened. I hear a lot of Gen Z and Gen Alpha complain about the older generations not protecting them. And I also hear a lot of the older generations being super upset with themselves of not stopping this at the start. I don't necessarily think anybody could have stopped this. And I'll be very honest up front. I did blame my parents for a small amount of time, but still a significant amount of time for giving me a laptop at 10, for example, and introducing me to that portal super early on. But again, like, nobody could have been able to predict how extractive and hyperstimulating and addictive these platforms and technologies were, are, and always will be. And so I guess in terms of like an ability to build a bridge between generations that is able to be traversed by both of them because they want to, I don't think that we should blame generations or blame our parents. I think that we should just accept the fact of what has happened and strive to do better in the future. I say this to young people, I say this to my parents, I say this to future parents, I say this to current parents. When you learn how to be emotionally intelligent, one of the things is to stop trying to figure out why something happened. That's an interesting question, but it's fundamentally uninteresting in terms of trying to generate a solution, and start trying to figure out, well, what do we do right now? And the biggest thing that I would tell people in terms of what to do as a starting point is, why are you using technology? As a very, very easy first question. For me, and one thing that you've highlighted very brilliantly is technology in this way, social media, for example, or the texting example that you highlighted with your daughter. We're still trying to engage in humanistic faculties. It's just easier to use social media and digital technologies for that. So, for example, I'm a heterosexual male. I'm very into women, and it's far easier for me to go on dating apps than it is to go up and talk to a woman. I don't necessarily believe that because I like going up. I enjoy doing the approach and everything, and having the awkwardness and having the real conversation. But that's just me. I understand that a lot of people cannot do that yet. But it is far easier to use a dating app to swipe. Now, is that going to result in anything? Tinder and Bumble and Hinge will lie to you and give you the statistics of, 23% of people find their match. I don't believe that's true, but that's a separate conversation. But the thing is that all these technologies are meant to augment humans. They're meant to augment something about this. Remember, the fundamental thing about technology is it is an augment on humans. A rock is a technology as an augment of human strength. An arrow is an augment of as a technology in terms of augmenting human reach. Democracy is a technology in terms of augmenting human capability of organizing in a way that restores power and sovereignty. These technologies are purposeful in their design. It's just we had no effing clue what we were doing by administering them in this way. There were no guardrails. So the same technology that allows me to meet you, for example, will allow me to stay on the internet for 12 hours a day. There's no guardrail on that other than the battery life and maybe my internet provider. On Instagram, I can go and I can text a girl that might be my wife. Very cool. I can also go and scroll on Reels for 12 hours a day. And the only guardrail is my imposing of screen time, which then I can just bypass, right? So I think the most fundamental thing to realize, again, in this day and age of realizing what digital technology has done to our civilization, don't blame people. Don't blame yourselves. Don't blame your kids. Tell your kids not to blame you. And let's start a conversation of, well, what do we do now? What is the easiest step that we can take? Why are you using technology in the first place? Because again, and I'll wrap up this kind of TED talk that I'm on with this example. Because again, it's very easy for me to say all of these things because I've been thinking about them for years and years, like almost half a decade already. But a lot of parents still don't realize, a lot of people still don't realize how ingrained technology is for my generation. They don't get it. And I understand that completely because again, it's like, you know, I wasn't born in Montreal, but let's say I would have grown up with French. But for somebody that wasn't born in Montreal and coming into Montreal, it's very difficult to get accustomed to the language, right? It's very natural. It's something that we can all understand. When we go to Italy, we all don't speak Italian. And so it's very difficult to get accustomed to the language, right? It's pretty basic. And so if you're not born into technology, it's very difficult to understand how somebody who was born into technology, how they think about the world. I can write as much as I want, but unless you're actively trying to understand your child or understand the person, it's not going to happen. So here's the example. So when your child is on a group chat on social media, let's say you take away the phone. Your child is acting up and you take away the phone. The child cannot access the phone, meaning they cannot access that group chat. What is happening right now is something that you don't realize, unfortunately, and you don't necessarily care because you don't realize it. But your child is actually going to be ostracized from you taking away that phone and that group chat. Well, why? Seems like an exaggeration. Allow me to explain. So when you take away the phone, the group chat is still going on and your child is unable to access that group chat in cyberspace. Your child could definitely go and knock on your friend's door and be a part of that group chat again. It's unlikely that's going to happen. So what's happening is that in cyberspace, there's still a conversation going on without your child contributing to it. They're exchanging inside jokes, they're sending memes, they're sending messages, all without your child being a part of it. And so, as we all know, when friends hang out without us, we all experience FOMO, fear of missing out. That's in the physical world. That still happens in cyberspace. That is still happening on Instagram and TikTok and X and all of these places where group chat conversations are able to be had. And so when your child goes back into physical reality, whether it's at school or at church or something, and tries to engage with those friends, they have a closer bond because they engaged with that group chat conversation without your child. And so your child is actually, in a sense, ostracized in that way because maybe there was a meme that was super funny that they remember or an inside joke that was generated. And now your child has to catch up. And so even taking away the phone for an hour means that your child might be like the social hierarchy of where your child was in that friend group is diminished. Is this an absolutist example? No. Just giving not even just a hypothetical because this has happened, but like I'm giving the easiest example to understand. Other generations never had to deal with this. Like to talk about cyberspace and Instagram group chats to them is like, dude, I have no care about this. I get it. I'm on your side. I also don't have care about this. But this is like a socially evolved digital rehash of something that we're all very, very focused on, which is status at the end of the day. It's where we fall in the hierarchy. It's how people perceive us. What is our reputation? And so for the people born into digital technology, it's not just physical reality and the way that people in physical reality perceive us. It is also not a layer on top, but actually as a bifurcation. It is how people perceive us in physical reality and how we present ourselves in cyberspace on social media. And those two things very likely are close to each other, but more often than not, they are completely distinct. And so the easiest way to understand how people think is that they are not living just in this world, right? They are experiencing a portal into a completely different dimension where things move in milliseconds, where news travels from Budapest to now in nanoseconds, where they can access an infinite amount of information, disinformation, misinformation at the tips of their fingers. You said earlier, a child knew so much about the technology beforehand. There's a reason why. It's actually a Mark Norman joke, but it's completely and utterly pertinent. When your child comes up to you and is like, "Why is the Pacific Ocean called the Pacific Ocean?" Right? You give them an answer, Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. They ask, why is the moon 400 times smaller than the sun and also 400 times closer than the sun? You're like, I have no clue. Go away. I don't want to talk to you. I'm doing my mom duties and all of that. And so the next time your child has a question like that, they don't go to mom or dad, they go to Google. Google gives them an answer. Now it's ChatGPT gives them an answer. And so now they don't want to go to mom and dad for the answer because mom and dad is going to shoo them away. Why would they go and have the social friction? Why wouldn't they just go to technology? So you see, all of these things start making sense about human behavior with technology. All of these things, once you start realizing how technology has invaded and apologies for using this word, but molested people in this way, especially children, then you start realizing all of the little quirks that people have and fidgets of contemporary society.
I loved those examples, and they were so true to form. And I think us as parents, regardless of the age of our kids, we need to understand that their access to that technology, that instant answers, the ability to research. I mean, I only see it from you and I are meeting over Zoom, and it's this crystal clear image of each other, and we get to see each other and hear each other. And this technology, Zoom itself, only came into my world in 2021 as, COVID was here. I was working in a law office. We weren't allowed to work from home. We were still required to work in office because our bosses were of an older generation than even us. So they weren't ready for this major change. And now they can't meet with clients. They can't go in front of judges. And how are we going to make these things happen in a blink of an eye so we don't miss anything? And so it was like, oh, well, there's this thing called Zoom. And so then we were all scrambling to buy cameras and get it set up and teach our clients how to use it and work with the courthouses. And I mean, it was just so much going on that we had to bounce so quickly. But then I talked to other people and like, oh, I've been using Zoom for 10 years. And I'm like, I didn't even know it existed. So again, sometimes I feel like I'm way behind the curve, but having these conversations with you and you sharing examples like this really helped me to understand my children, my grandchildren. My grandson's 9. And, we had him over for the day on Friday. We always bring him over the day after Thanksgiving to help us set up our Christmas tree. And I wanted to show him a stuffed animal that my husband had bought me while he was on a trip, and it's this stuffed Bucky beaver. I had never heard of Buc-ee's. It's this huge thing in Texas. It's like, more intense than Walmart, bigger than Walmart, crazier than Walmart. I had never heard of it. It's a thing. I got on Google just to learn about it. And the videos and the comments from people were like, "Oh my god, we travel from all over the world just to go to Buc-ee's." I didn't know what a Buc-ee's was. And my grandson, who was 9, before I even said what it was, he knew exactly who Bucky Beaver was and knew all about Buc-ee's and was ready to travel to Texas to go to Buc-ee's. And I'm like, "How do you know about Buc-ee's?" He goes, "Grandma, YouTube." Okay, and then he was just like spouting off all this information. I said, "You really know a lot more than I do about what's going on outside of my local community, and you're 9." And it just amazes me his depth of knowledge and just seeing the things that he's interested in that we had to break out an encyclopedia if we wanted to learn about dinosaurs. And he's showing his grandfather what dinosaurs sound like. And I'm thinking, well, who knows what dinosaurs really sound like? None of us were around to know what dinosaurs really sounded like, but it's just this technology that he has at his fingertips, and he's so involved in it. But at the same time, I get to see him develop his interests in a way that we couldn't. And so, I try not to think he's on it too much. I know that that's just the technology that he has. He can access it on the TV. He can access it on a cell phone. He can access it on a tablet. They his parents do their best to protect him and limit his time. But now listening to your examples of what's going on with his nervous system, his identity, his anxiety, if those things are taken away from him, which was so different from when we were grounded and had things taken away from us. But it's interesting, and I really appreciate the examples that you shared. It's very valuable to me, my generation, and learning more about my kids and my grandkids. So, your background in philosophy gives you kind of a unique lens on AI. How do philosophical questions like consciousness or identity show up in your work with synthetic intelligence?
Yeah. They don't because, well, we don't understand what consciousness is, first of all. And one of the things that is a complete lie right now with people trying to think about artificial intelligence in the way that folks like Sam Altman or Dario Amati or, even Joe Rogan talk about it. There's no consciousness that's happening, that has happened, or that is going to happen, no matter how much they want people to believe that. And it's not going to emerge somehow. It's not that if we scale it up, as they keep saying, like make the data centers bigger and more training data that's going to emerge. It's just like expecting to make a parrot, if you feed a parrot more and more human food, that somehow it's going to have human consciousness. It's like even that example, people are like, that doesn't make any sense, and that's the point. And this keeps happening, and I don't understand why it keeps happening. But when you have a technology that is able to fool a lot of people, you're able to say kind of whatever you want about it. And especially with ChatGPT, with the way the world kind of wrapped around the entire product and the entire technology of large language models, I think everybody saw that as, oh, something is happening, the singularity, the Terminator, which is understandable again. But that's not what's happening. And it's not because I work for a competing company. I don't, because we don't compete with those technologies or that company. But again, I could spend the next hour talking to you about the ins and outs of why ChatGPT won't be conscious. But I'll just say this. If it was trained on the internet and people said that as soon as it's trained on the internet, it'll be conscious, and it's not conscious right now, then it's not going to be conscious because it fundamentally, like, you can't find consciousness from training data, number one. You can't find consciousness from algorithms, number two. And primarily, and this is the kicker, you can't build consciousness if you don't understand what is consciousness. And so with anybody trying to convince themselves that ChatGPT is conscious, just ask yourself, do you know what consciousness is? And the correct answer is no. And that's why it's one of the fundamental questions for about 5,000 years of philosophy, which is, why, like, what is human consciousness and how does it work and why does it exist? So, anyway, there's that. There is the question of identity. That's an interesting one. And I kind of want to skirt around that question and go back to your grandson because I think it'll loop in nicely. So when you were talking about your grandson and finding those interests, I was nodding my head, but I was kind of like cringing inside because he's not finding interests. He's being told what to be interested in. That's the scary part. That's what people don't realize is even using like a technology like ChatGPT when you're asking it about, God forbid, but like mental health stuff or relationship advice or anything like that. Oh my gosh, I'm terrified of that. AI psychosis, ChatGPT psychosis. I would recommend people research that. It's happening to more and more people, and not just vulnerable people. Like, one of my friends has a psychiatrist that recently emailed all of his clients saying that he's being chased by Pokemon and that he's on a quest for saving ChatGPT. And this is a certified psychiatrist who did 10 years of school and 10 like postdocs and has clients and everything that just went through AI psychosis, right? So it's not just, the dismissive, oh, it's vulnerable people. But anyway, your grandson is getting told what to be interested in by ChatGPT or by Instagram and such. And so his exploring, while he's able to learn what Bucky's is, he's also able to learn about politics in that same way. And his understanding of politics is going to be skewed by the millions of dollars spent on propaganda. in the United States alone, not to mention external actors, foreign actors. And so when young people, especially younger people, are online and finding themselves, quote unquote, we have to be very, very careful. And this is why this conversation needs to be had both with young people and with parents and between parents and young people, because I'm not advocating for policing internet usage, but at the same time, if your child is talking to ChatGPT or Replica or Claude, or if your child is finding themselves on Instagram, they're again coming back, and it's always interesting how it relates to emotional intelligence. Finding yourself is a very internal process, right? And you're asking yourself a bunch of questions. You're asking yourself to go through a certain spiritual journey. You can't have that if you're focused on the external. Social media and generative AI are all external. And so, just by definition, you're not finding anything. You're being told. Not to mention the algorithm that is far more understanding of what you're interested in, all the subtle things that you may not even be aware of. So, coming back to the question of identity, the scary part about generative AI and the important part about the work that I do for my company is we're not interested in changing the way that you are. Like, there's a great quote by, I think, Mencken, an American writer, and he's like, people who have an appetite to save the world is usually a false front for a hunger to control it. And New Sapiens doesn't do that. We don't really care who you are or how you want to look at the world, or we don't care about what you want to talk about, blah, blah, blah. Like, our goal is not to provide you with artificial general intelligence that is going to control your life. The goal is to give you tools to be more human. And the point of artificial intelligence as a technology always was to be an augment to human, coming back full circle. I mean, that's the point of technology in that sense. And so, by definition, if the technology is not augmenting you, but is extracting you and removing the humanistic faculties that make you you, then it's not augmenting you, it's actually diminishing you. So the goal of New Sapiens is to make sure that we restore that augment. We restore your ability to connect with yourself. We restore the ability for you to have the attention span to ask important questions when people are trying to get one up on you. We restore the ability to ask important questions in the classroom, at the dining table with your parents or with your family, not to be crass, but in the bedroom to find out who you are and what you enjoy, and not to be told what to think about romantically or sexually when it comes to anything. All of these really important things that we find really uncomfortable because we don't talk about it anymore, because we're being told what to say or what to think, or what is in fashion or not in fashion, or what is cool or not cool, or what influencer is wearing what dress. Nobody cares about that. All we need to care about, all we should care about, is how do I feel internally? And what I've seen, and my frustration, is every single technology that we have right now that is ubiquitous in society is taking us away from ourselves. And I feel like that is the fundamental reason why we all feel so empty. It's because we stopped caring about what we do and how we're feeling. And we started caring about what everybody else thinks about us. And just to end this point, the reason why I think shower thoughts exist in the way that they do right now is because it's the one place, I think, in the entire arc of our day where we don't have technology. And so we're just with ourselves. And so the reason why you have incredible, incredible thoughts in the shower, and you're like, holy crap, I just figured out the secret to the universe and I just made this incredible realization. It's because you didn't use technology to come to that conclusion. It's because you were not glaring at your phone and, turning your brain off. And I would use that framework of how powerful shower thoughts are to introduce people to meditation or just time away from technology in that way. So I hope that answers your question. It was a long way, but like this moment that we're in sheds light on what we're missing in society and missing in humanity.
It did actually. And, thank you for reframing my thoughts with my grandson and his interest. For him, I think he rolled out of the womb interested in dinosaurs. That was his thing. Always has been. He's 9. He is still very much into dinosaurs. And so what we try to do, we had a thing here in our town where they did like a drive-through event, where they had brought in dinosaurs that they had taken out of exhibits from our museums and put them out in this parking lot where kids could, drive through and hear the sounds and see their size. And then there was a whole exhibit that we could take them to inside where they really got to just kind of play and be kids and dig in dirt and look for fossils and, all the really good and just watching his excitement. But now seeing, that he's still very much interested in dinosaurs, but that's what he's searching for. So like you said, it's what's being put in front of him and put in front of him and put in front of him through the algorithms. Um, so
See, let me interrupt you just right there because it's a really, really important point. Sorry to interrupt you. So when your child, sorry, when your grandson is going through that and he's really interested in dinosaurs, he's one video or one click away from, did the dinosaurs ever exist? Right. And so that's to me is he's 9. You can't expect him to have the intellectual maturity to be like, oh, that's probably misinformation. Did the dinosaurs ever exist? It's a really interesting question. We're all interested in that because just a fascinating question. Like, were we lied to? For example, like everybody wants to know if they're lied to, and so we can't blame people for getting involved in conspiracy theories and all of that. But that's just another conversation. But that is the danger. As soon as he clicks on "Did the dinosaurs ever exist?" that video, the entire algorithm changes, and it's going to go into did a certain tragedy that in 2001 ever happen? Was it an inside job? Are the pyramids real? What is the secret of the pyramids? All of that. And then that exact thing is what dives people into the conspiratorial rabbit hole. And then the next time you bring him to the exhibit, he's not really interested in dinosaurs. He's going to go up to the person at the exhibit and be like, "How do you know that they're real?" And the person at the exhibit is going to be like, "Oh, this science and that science," and your grandson is going to be like, "Well, that is all fake. And here's why, based off of made up resources from ChatGPT because it hallucinated, right?" And then you start seeing all of these different ways that these technologies intersect to create and perpetrate and propagate and manipulate a certain bubble just for your reality. And it's so difficult to get him back to that because you can't sit him down and be like, "Look, grandson, dinosaurs existed. Here's why. Here's all of the evidence," because he already has the skepticism and all of the doubt. One of the greatest things about humans is that we love to be skeptical about things. And our skepticism and our curiosity is what takes us down the rabbit hole to figure the miracles out. Like 100%, that's a fantastic trait. I don't want to remove that. But especially with these technologies, that when they're able to inject people with certain bubbles of conspiratorial thought or however you want to phrase it, especially when you're 9, that is terrifying because he's going to grow up for the rest of his life in this hypothetical thinking that the dinosaurs just were not real. And that's going to cause him to pursue other rabbit holes and pursue other things that are not healthy. So again, I apologize for interrupting you, but that is where I see the real danger of these kinds of platforms and their cavalier stance in not there's and it gets into politics, and I don't want to get into politics, but there's a real difference between freedom of speech and the stuff that YouTube allows. I use YouTube as an umbrella term for the algorithms, but you know, some people would say, "Oh, but you're allowed to post stuff about that because it's freedom of speech." And again, it's a very nuanced discussion and we can have that another time, but I disagree with this simply because you're not just introducing them to a different kind of skeptical point. If you and I were in conversation about the dinosaurs and I were to say, the dinosaurs never existed, in terms of a one-to-one conversation, really interesting, your immediate question would be, what do you mean? How can you say that? Then the burden of proof is on me to provide you in terms of this social connection that we have, with evidence, with supporting arguments, with critical thinking to try to shift your thinking, to try to persuade you. But when you're doing that on YouTube, there's no social connection. There's no burden of proof. You can just make and say whatever you want. And if people are affected, cool. Then they're affected for the rest of their life. And that's it. And so Again, it's very, very, very nuanced, and I can already hear people disagreeing with me, and I appreciate that because that's what freedom of speech is for. But I get really, really concerned when it's not just your grandson as one individual, but it's entire populations around the world that are running completely different world models with completely different realities, completely on the same thing, but they're seeing it in completely different ways. And then you start realizing why the entire world is so polarized right now.
Absolutely, and it is very frightening. We didn't have the same worries or concerns, in my generation. We had to go to the library, and we had to use a Rolodex, and we had to find a book, and that was this is the information we were given. If it's in an encyclopedia, then it's real. But at the same time, as I was going through a phase in my life where I was questioning, I don't want to say questioning my identity, but I've been a mom since I was 17. And at 45, I had just ended a 20-year marriage. My kids were grown. And for the first time, literally in my existence, I was alone. I had to find an apartment. I had to move into this apartment by myself, and I had to decorate this apartment. And I felt like, what do I even like? What is my identity? Because I was so used to living in a home that was decorated with my kids' interests, with my ex-husband's interests, with whatever. But I don't remember there really being a piece of me in my home other than me being in it and being a part of the family. And so then I'm like, okay, now I need to decorate the space for myself. And luckily I had spent, and I was starting on a journey of, like you said, doing that introspection. Like, who am I? What are my values? What are my interests? You know, who am I as a person? And I found that in experiencing things I had never tried before, like yoga and attending yoga classes. And then I found out, well, okay, I like yoga, but I really felt like I wasn't learning the full information about yoga. I was learning how to be in a group class, how to follow an instructor, and how to move the same as everybody else. I wanted more information. I wanted to know the theory behind it, the history behind it, all of that kind of stuff. And that you don't get going to a class. And so I went back to what I knew. Go to the library, check out a book, read a book, learn more about it, ask questions. And I have spent the last probably 5 years unpacking my childhood, questioning, where did these beliefs come from? Where do these thoughts come from? How much of this did I inherit from my mother, my aunts, my grandmother? And is it really me in what I believe, in what I think, in my values? But know that I now have the opportunity to use my brain for myself and question things and make decisions for myself, not just based on information I received growing up. And so that's how I kind of view the ability to have instant technology. And I'm still kind of the old school, let me go get a book and read a book. And but then we have, like, doctors of today were limited by what they learned in medical school. And so unless they're starting to question things that their body's experiencing that they didn't learn in medical school, they're not open to different forms of things, like not necessarily meditation, but other modalities that are available. And for me, that's where I enjoy the technology side of it, is because I can learn, like I learned how to meditate from YouTube. I found a person I resonated with that taught the basic skills for meditation along with the information. So it's so different in the way we grew up and the things that you're sharing here. And I really appreciate your knowledge. Can you tell me a little more about what you do?
Yeah. Um, the title is creative director, but obviously that's just the title. Fundamental role is trying to figure out how an artificial general intelligence would impact people in their daily lives, in their businesses, and how to not let humanity devolve and have their humanistic faculties diminished. And so for me, I wrote a book called AI for Gen Z. I'm coming out with another book in the next year called The Transcendence of Money. It's about cryptocurrency. Because I think it's a really fascinating thing, and I don't think people appreciate it for a very good reason, because it's fundamentally a scam right now, the entire industry. And it's a really fascinating exploration into how the industry devolved into that. Same thing that happened with democracy, same thing that happened with the internet happened with cryptocurrency, and it's all connected in some very gorgeous, terrifying way. But that's aside. To me, in the book, one of the first things I write is powerful technology can be dangerous if the wisdom to wield it is not proportional. And that's the thing that I value so much. And I'm so, without arrogance, proud of myself for realizing this very early on in my career and in my life is I don't want to build technology that just removes people from who they are. I want to contribute to technology that gives people more of who they are. And even if they don't know who they are, gives you space to explore that and understand that in your own way. And so if we're building powerful technology and we have any conviction that we're going to be successful, then I want to start asking these questions now and start getting the conversation started now. The first thing you learn when you're not in traditional healthcare, which is reactive, is to be proactive with your health. Peter Attia's book, Outlive, is a great resource for that because he teaches you the three pillars to focus on in terms of proactive healthcare, which is diet, exercise, and sleep, and socialization in some way, but that's aside. So that's kind of the role in terms of the 9 to 5, if we can call it that. It's usually a 7 to 7. Obviously, I'm an author, I do a podcast, I model a little bit on the side, but basically everything is for humanity in some true way. I live my life in that way. And I have been blessed to meet people who are also along those lines. And I have been also blessed to meet people who are not along those lines because I think both role models and anti role models are very important. And I see a lot of anti role models right now, especially in my industry, that are saying whatever they want about artificial intelligence and other technologies with no basis to say it, and also no philosophy behind it, and also no rigor to back up what they're saying, and no like integrity to actually believe in what they're doing. So I hope that was a short and sweet answer, but yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating. I grew up with like when Windows came out. That was a big, big thing. I'd been using a little, 486 computer, black and orange monochrome screen databases. And that was the level of technology that we used in my profession. And then when Windows came out, I was always very hungry to want to learn more, want to do more, let me do everything. I'm a giant sponge, that of course that was in my early 20s. I was very much a sponge. And so that was a benefit to my bosses because they were like, "Oh, you want to learn about this? Well, here's your assignment. I want you to learn about it. I want you to install it, and then I want you to teach it." So, here comes Windows. We get all new computers, get it all set up. They had no idea how to read email, all of the different wonderful things that you could do with it. PageMaker, designing flyers and mailers and all things that were done, very slowly can now be done so fast. And updating, taking this data table of membership information and then what was capable now that we could do with this information. And so, like I said, my job was to learn it, install it, and teach it to a staff of 20. And then went to the next level, and I was invited to go and attend a board function, which was a board of 40 who were presidents of banks and the school system and, all these higher ranking officials in my community. And here I am, probably 19, 20 years old, creating slides and putting them on an overhead projector to teach them how to now use Windows. And then it was like, "Ah, okay, well, you have this information. So now come to my company and help me put this in place." And I was like, okay, now this is getting a little outside my realm, but being involved in that, kept me hungry for it. So as my knowledge grew over time, and then we have people in our business who are IT professionals. Instead of, picking up the phone or trying to find somebody and say, "I don't know what my computer's doing. It's not working. Can you help me?" And their first response was reboot. I was like, instead of either you coming over and fixing it or just telling me one thing to try first, I want to learn. Just continue to teach me what you know so that I'm not reliant on you or anyone else to fix my technology. I want to know what it's doing. I want to understand it. And so being in your role where there are people relying on your humanity to be an influence on how to keep the rest of us human in the face of this technology.
Yeah, like I I'm the same person, like regardless. And I think it's really important to call people out when they need to be called out. And so for me, like for example, I've always said that I don't care about the money from the book. Like I want people to have the book in whatever way that they want. The first AI for Gen Z book, but for all my books anyway. And so I'm the one that I published it as a PDF on my own site, right? Like giving it away for free. I don't like I when I say that I don't care about that, sure. I'm not trying to be arrogant in the way that like I'm not saying I don't care about money, even though I don't, but like I don't care about it in the same way. But to me, the point of the book was not to make money from it. Like I don't understand why people go on podcasts and like sell books and courses and then preach a holier than thou perspective on humanity. The point is, if you want to help humanity, like bloody help humanity. And so for me, I try to be as consistent, but to me, it's not being consistent because then that means that I'm thinking about it. I'm just me through and through everywhere. And so I always want to make sure that I'm in service of my fellow human and my fellow species because we all know what the issues in our world are and we all know that we want to solve them. And for us to just sit back and talk about the issues and complain about them is one thing, which my generation is really good at. But I don't want to keep doing that. I want to actually create cross generational groups that utilize the understanding that other generations and more experienced generations have with the hunger, tenacity, and strive to change the world that my generation has. And that is what I'm really obsessed about. And so in this age of seeing right through people, I'm very aware of that. And that's why in a non psychopathic way, but I really made sure to be as see through as possible, as transparent as possible, as real as possible. Because energy does not lie for people. It's very easy to see who Sam Altman is or who a politician is. But this is something I just realized growing up on the internet is that when you have the trust of people, you have to wield that responsibility and that real power very, very carefully. And now I don't want power over people. I actually want to restore power to people. I want to restore power to the individual. But that is just something that I always think about is how do you help humanity without forcing help on humanity? And it's a question that I haven't had a proper answer to, but I'm always thinking about it because again, as Mencken said, confused. Like people who have an appetite to save humanity usually have a hunger to control it. I have no hunger to control humanity. I'm just focused on myself and trying to produce the most impactful and beautiful books as possible, contributing to the company in the best way as possible, record as many great podcasts as possible. Again, all in service of when people 500 years come back and stumble across my site or my YouTube channel or the books, what are they going to derive from it? Who was this person and what did they stand for? And I want them to take away that I stood for humanity.
I love it, and thank you for doing that and for having that focus and for bringing that attention to people to remind them of who we are and what we are capable of doing and what we have to be careful, like you said. And I like how you talked about your podcast and podcasts in general. When I launched this podcast, my focus was to share the people that I met in my local community that helped me at a time when I was struggling with anxiety and depression and panic and brain fog and memory loss and all these things that I didn't understand about what my body was experiencing because I had spent a life of shoving down my feelings, my emotions, my trauma. I didn't until I was in my 40s start learning about my own nervous system. And maybe that was my own lack of paying attention in school when I could have been learning about my nervous system in science class or whatever, but at that age it wasn't something that was important to me. And now that I'm learning about it, I'm like, why didn't I know about this before? Why am I just now in my 40s learning about my nervous system and that my body has held on to trauma and what is available to me to help me either learn more about it, learn modalities that help, and be able to provide that information to others. So, as I was going through all of these things in my life, and I was in a position where I was forced to leave my career in the legal field because my anxiety and brain fog and memory loss were so extreme that I feared if I make a mistake because I'm not thinking clearly, I can really harm another person who has spent a lot of money to make sure that I am part of a team that is best representing them in a lawsuit or whatever. And I feared being so out of control. I feared literally like waking up every morning and feeling like my brain was blank. My thoughts were gone. I couldn't remember people's names. I couldn't remember things about cases. And so I left my career and started working on my mental health, my physical health. What had I been ignoring, pushing down, or denying for so many years to keep pushing through, to keep being my best at what I did in my profession? And so then I started learning about all these other wonderful modalities and learning from people in my local community that were also relying on word of mouth to grow their business, helping people with these modalities. And I started with working with an herbalist and just learning about all of these wonderful herbs that are available to us here in our state. And you can go and you can pick these herbs and turn them into teas that will calm your nervous system. And so, starting this podcast, I really wanted it to be a platform where I could bring these people on, learn their story. Like, how did you get here? Because we all have a story that brought us where we are right now, as I've been sharing mine with you. Um, how did I get here? How did they get here? How did they come into this profession? Who do they help? And how are they helping them? And being able to share that information with a much larger population than our local community. And so that was me being in service to other people who didn't have access to this information or don't have access to this information. And just to provide education and information. And so that's where my start of this podcast came from, is just being able to share information to the greater world at large. And if it's something that somebody is seeking answers to, like you said, they're going to have answers coming at them from every direction. Um, Hopefully, I'm just a piece of that shares this is how it helped me. It may not be the answer for you, but it truly made an impact in my life. and now I just wanna share that information with others. And you and I talked about when we first met and chatted about how AI and Gen Z or Gen Alpha have really been affected in their memory span and their attention span. Um, and again, I'm looking to you for your knowledge and your experience and how you can help me as a mom, as a grandma, understand more about it. So if you could talk kind of more to how it's affecting attention span and their ability to communicate like within the classroom.
The best place to start is not the users, but the creators. Everybody knows that time on site is very, very important. I shouldn't say everybody knows that. Well, time on site as a metric is very, very important. What that metric is in the name is how much time you spend on that specific platform, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat or YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And so you're always trying to optimize for time on site, which is why you recommend things that the user is interested in and sometimes not interested in to generate interest and curiosity to get them to click more, click around, spend more time on the site, consume advertisements, blah, blah, blah. And so when you are, as a creator, creating something, the algorithm is going to favor the creators that produce content that directly enhance time on site. And just as an easy question, it's going to be a rhetorical question, but your audience will be able to answer it pretty quickly. The easier to consume content, which is the easier to consume content? The video that's 60 seconds or the video that's 60 minutes? Pretty easy to answer. What is the easier thing to consume? The video that's 30 seconds or the video that's 60 seconds? The video that's 10 seconds, a video that's 15 seconds, video that's 3 seconds versus the video that's 10 seconds, right? So you can see the slippery slope that's taking place in the hypothetical, but that's taking place in reality. And so the average TikTok is like 3 to 15 seconds, for example. So what ends up happening is that you're consuming things not in the slow, sometimes methodical way that you were watching YouTube videos or documentaries. Remember, in the before times, TV shows used to come out like once a week. So you had to wait to binge, right? Now you have Netflix episodes that, granted, they're an hour long, but you can still binge them. 8 episodes, 1 hour each. You're spending 8 hours. You're spending a Sunday watching it, right? But if you're on your phone and you're watching for an hour, 3-second TikToks, you can, watch hundreds or even thousands of things, right? And we talked about books beforehand. The reason why people don't like books anymore is because there's too much friction, it's too much effort, it takes too many calories to burn to to read a book. And so audiobooks are more interesting, podcasts are more interesting, ChatGPT summaries are easier, tweets are easier. And so you see this slow but very explicit kind of death of friction towards convenience. And we've all experienced that. Like, we know people who doom scroll. I know people, some of my friends spend like 7 hours on Instagram per day, which is crazy to me, but what can you do? And what happens in the classroom is that nobody's able to pay attention. And then you get symptoms like ADD and ADHD because people just cannot fundamentally sit still. Because from 5 years old, when they were given a phone, they were online scrolling. I used to take piano lessons last year, and this little girl was before me. I'd gotten there pretty early because it was like a snowstorm. I didn't want to be late, and I was sitting in like the lobby, which was just the person's living room. And the little girl came out, and she sat in my spot. I went to go to the piano, and I looked over because like she was still there even after 10 minutes, or her mom hadn't come, probably because of the snowstorm. And I looked over, and she was just like, you know, phone an inch from her face, probably swiping on TikTok or Instagram or something. And I was like, dude, I was asking my instructor, like, hey, how old is she? And she's like, I think she's like 4 or 5. I'm like, you are 5 years. Let's be as generous as possible. Let's say she was like 7, right? You are a 7-year-old with their phone an inch from your face, scrolling on TikTok for whatever, 15, 20 minutes. That's terrifying. It's genuinely terrifying. It's terrifying if it's a 70-year-old, but a 7-year-old, oh my God. So let's say, I mean, not let's say, but she's going to grow up and she's going to be 12 or 15 or 18 and she's going to be in school or university and she's not going to be able to pay attention to anything. She's going to blame herself and she's going to take medication or she's going to flunk out of class and she's going to pursue other things because school never worked for her because school is still like a slow, methodical, rudimentary. Modern education is trash anyway, so that's a hit on modern education and not her, but let's pretend that modern education was actually useful. She's not going to be able to pay attention to class because she's just online constantly and consuming so many things that reduce her attention span. And so that is already, just from that 3-minute scenario, terrifying and bad. But then you come to, okay, what is it going to be like when she's looking for friends, when she's looking for a romantic partner, when she's going to vote, when she's at work? What does that look like? And all of that spells trouble. When she's looking for a romantic partner, for example, she's not going to give anybody the time of day. She's not going to be able to look her romantic prospect in the eye and release the oxytocin that comes from eye contact because um, she has no experience making eye contact because she's never looked at people in the eyes. She's always put her neck down and looked at the phone, for example. When it comes to vote, she's not going to be able to understand any policy decisions because she has no ability to read. And so she's going to consume TikToks and Reels and short YouTube videos on what the policy is, which doesn't mean that she's going to understand it. She's going to understand enough to make a decision that doesn't actually inform the trajectory of the country. It just gives her the ability to post that she voted on Instagram. And when it comes to friends, she's not going to be able to actually have meaningful and deep conversations. Again, going to the oxytocin and the ability to understand where somebody is coming from. She's just going to be able to meet people where they're superficially at because her friends as well are not able to meet her where she's at. So they're not able to ask her questions that mean something to her. And she's not going to be able to even give them those answers because she's never thought about it because she's had a phone 1 inch from her face since she was 7. And so all of these things, even at work, again, she's going to get fired probably because she's not able to pay attention at work and pay attention to her boss and follow simple instructions. So this is the generation that we have, right? And again, going back all the way to the very beginning, because I know we're coming up on time, but the easiest way, and again, I am fully aware that we're not going to solve all of this overnight. I'm fully aware that we may not even be able to solve all of this indefinitely, but it doesn't mean that we cannot start trying. I'd rather all parents, sit down with their kids and say, look, this is what the phone is doing to you. This is what is happening. Let's all have a conversation. One of my really, really good friends, his name is Christopher Lind. He has 7 children. I think he has 8. He just had a baby boy about 8 months ago. And his child was on Minecraft for a very long time in the day. And this was a repeated behavior. And so Christopher, as a dad, he didn't get upset with the child. He didn't do anything. He instead said, hey, can we talk about this? Like, before you get on today, let's just talk. Like, what is happening right now? Why are you on so much? Child's like, oh, like I'm really interested. I'm really, really happy to be with my friends and everything. And Christopher is saying, well, the game may be fun and very stimulating. You may be having a lot of fun with your friends online, but there's still a very important aspect of your childhood that you should spend offline. Spend it with me, spend it with your mom, spend it with your siblings. You have 7 of them. Spend it outside with your friends. And he's like, okay, how about this? For the next 30 days, let's do a hybrid approach. I'm not going to let you spend all this time online, but I'm also not going to shut it off completely, because then that introduces other behavior. But I would like you to spend more time with me, more time with your siblings, more time with your friends, more time with your mom, and see if you also get the same kind of satisfaction from that. And the reason why he was able to have this conversation with his child is because he had been teaching and nurturing his child from a very young age to even be able to have this conversation. And so what happened? The child got far, far, far more satisfaction of what they were looking for in Minecraft out in daily life and physical reality. And so this is just one example. Again, it's a very specific example from a dad who was a fantastic, fantastic dad and fantastic person. As a parent, it's not going to be as easy because every teenager goes through the rebellious phase. And one thing that I don't like about my generation is we think that any generation that doesn't have an understanding of technology like we do are idiots. And I use that term very respectfully, but I can understand where my generation is coming from. It doesn't mean that they're correct. And so it's very difficult to talk to people who are already looking down on you. And that is something that I think, with respect, older generations just have to deal with and get through. Of, hey, you may understand the technology far more than I do, but that doesn't mean you understand fully what the technology is doing to you. And it doesn't mean that you are correct. I may not have the experience as an older generation to understand exactly what you were going through, and I can accept that and I can respect that. But at the same time, you also don't have the experience of being 40 and 50. And so, by definition, respect your elders or just listen to somebody with a little bit more experience, a little bit more understanding of life than you. And let's not be authoritarian parents or helicopter parents. Let's just have a conversation. Why are you online so much? Why are you not talking to me as much? Let's create, and at the same time, this is an opportunity for older generations to start stepping into like bigger shoes and start filling more gaps. Create more of a community with your neighbors and with the fellow people in your community. Like, it doesn't have to be just families talking within the family. It can be families, hosting sessions around the community. Let's talk about how the smartphone is impacting people. It's not just about the way that people use the smartphone in the family at the dining table. It's about who they're texting at the dining table. It's about the people that they're talking to. So let's have like these panel discussions of all the kids in the community where, okay, we're on Thursday, we're all gonna have the no phone day, for example. Again, I'm just rambling right now, but this is the type of stuff that we need to start proactively doing if we want some kind of change to happen. Again, we cannot expect change to happen from the people that have already molested us. That doesn't make any sense. We cannot expect big tech to one day wake up and say, you know what, all the extractive and addictive algorithms that are making us trillions, we're just going to turn that off because some people are upset. It's not going to happen. What we should do is, okay, we understand that big tech is not going to change. We understand exactly why. It's not to say that they're evil and they're doing this purposefully, even though I believe they're doing it purposefully. Well, they're doing it because they understand what they're doing. Let's say it like that. But we're not going to let their monopoly dictate our future. And so we can take steps in order to mitigate their destructive tendencies. Again, everybody that I know drinks, right? Like, having a glass of wine is fine. Going on Instagram is fine. Going on YouTube and watching a documentary or just like watching funny videos, totally cool. It's not like we're trying to ban it, but we are saying that in the same way that if your friend drinks a glass of wine, you don't bat an eye. But if you see your friend downing 3 bottles of wine per day for a month, you're going to be like, dude, are you okay? In the exact same way, we have to treat these platforms as those toxic substances that are already socially stereotypically bad, right? Treat doom scrolling in the same way you treat heroin shots. Treat Netflix binging in the same way that you treat somebody smoking a cigarette. Treat going on Instagram and caring about how many followers and likes and all of that. Treat that as, hey, like romantic partner or friend or family member or colleague. Like, I've seen you drink every night for the past week. Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Let's start actually treating the things that are going on in cyberspace like the way that we treat things in physical reality. And that is the nice bow at the end of the podcast, which is the things that are happening in cyberspace hold as much weight as they do in physical reality now. And older generations need to understand this, because if they don't, we're still going to be stuck in the same position and everybody's going to be suffering in the same ways, because Gen Z and Gen Alpha and some latter parts of millennials literally are living two lives in physical reality and cyberspace. And that is what we need to talk.
Thank you so much. I mean, everything you just wrapped this up with was so valuable, so important, such reminders that, we do need to treat the cell phone, YouTube, the computer in that way that we, would question or would support a friend or a family member, seeing those addictions or seeing their shutting themselves off from society and just doom scrolling, um, and have those conversations, have the be a supportive friend and and have those conversations because I think a lot of people shy away from the difficult conversations because if I was going to talk to a friend and say, "Okay, I'm concerned that you went from cigarettes to vaping. Do you truly understand what both of those things were doing to your body? Or are you just replacing one addiction with another?" But I think we have a hard time having those conversations because we worry about how that other person's going to react or respond when we do start those conversations. But I think we need to remember uh, just like anything else, keeping it in silence, whether it's toxic masculinity, whether it's addiction, whatever it is, the longer we keep it in silence, that's just what we're going to do. We're just going to keep it in silence. And if we can open those conversations, if we can teach our kids, if we can have those conversations with our adults, with our friends, with our children, and bring that information out into our community, like you said, have these roundtable discussions and say, "Hey, do you know what this is actually doing to your child? Let's talk about things that we can do differently to help our children separate themselves from that technology and spend more time out riding a bike." Parent to parent, having those conversations is just so valuable. So I absolutely appreciate your time here, your insight, the examples that you have shared because they were so totally valuable to me. I know that other people are going to hear them and they're going to feel the same way. Where can people find you and connect with you? I wanna make sure to include that in the show notes, and I will definitely link your YouTube channel as well because I have enjoyed watching your YouTube channel.
No, I appreciate that. And people can find me online, ayushprakash.com. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email, download the book, like whatever you want. I'm very open and available for my fellow humans. The one thing that I would want to close out the show with is, this is not going to happen overnight, as I was saying. It is another meta realization that our expectation of things changing overnight is part and parcel with our instant gratification that was given to us by social media and now generative AI. So modern solutions need sorry, in order to have solutions to the modern problems, they cannot be based in modern thinking. And so it's a little fuzzy, but we cannot expect one day for everybody to just wake up and suddenly not want, you know, sorry to be crass, but like digital adult films over physical intimacy, or to not want to use social media and to just sit there being bored, which is much healthier. It's again, this is the difficulty for people to realize how cyberspace affects you, but we all know that a Snickers bar is far more delicious than a salad. We all know that. It is incredible. I mean, the Snickers bar is probably the perfect candy bar, other than Twix, but it's an incredible candy bar. It's much tastier than a salad, I'll be honest. But we all know why you want the salad over the Snickers bar. It's a very, very simple thing. It's not as obvious for digital adult films versus physical intimacy. It's not as obvious for social media versus one-to-one communication and interaction. And so I guess being just a little more patient and meeting people where they're at and not trying to change them. It's very different if your friend is smoking cigarettes a bunch and they know it's bad for them and you know it's bad for them. It's very different from you saying, "Hey, stop doing that. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to get cancer. Stop doing that. It's bad for you." Versus, "Hey, can we have a conversation? Like, I've seen you smoking cigarettes a bunch. Like, what's up? Like, are you okay?" Those are very, very different conversations that are going to get very different reactions. One is you stepping into hate and trying to control them. Another is you stepping into love and trying to understand where they're coming from and offering a helping hand. And so in the same way, we need to do that. We need to teach people how to not try to control humanity, not trying to control their fellow individual, because you're just offering the same authoritarian lever in an individual sense as big tech is producing in the monopolistic technological sense. So let's restore a lot of what makes humans humans, which is just connecting with your fellow person, just giving them love. Everybody's here to learn, everybody is here to grow. even if you spend a year with somebody and they're still smoking cigarettes or using digital adult films, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. It just means that they have a different journey. And happiness is not found by injecting people with it. It's found from an internal realization of what they're doing and them choosing by themselves to correct it. And so, if we really want to have happiness on tap, we have to give people the ability to pull the lever and push that lever themselves rather than trying to force them with our hand or with everybody else's.
And what a great way to end this conversation. Thank you so much for putting that out there so that people can remember those things and the value of one to one connection and meeting people where they are, not judging them, not forcing them, not berating them, not making them feel bad for their choices, but just meeting them where they are, and having those conversations. How can I help? Being an ear, just being present with somebody and sitting with them and understanding maybe where their mind is the best way that, we can start having those conversations. Even in difficult conversations, I recently had a friend who lost her husband of 24 years. And it wasn't coming to her to talk about how to heal from grief. It was just to sit in the room with her. I want to be here with you, whether it's to be here while you cry, to be here while you sleep, to be here to help cook a meal for you, to just be here. And not coming to her as a coach or anything else, just coming to her as a friend and as a human and just, so it's everything you said was so powerful and so insightful. And I want to thank you for bringing depth and clarity this in your heart to this conversation and to help people start to reflect on what it means to stay human in this digital world that is evolving faster than our own biology. And so for listeners, if today's episode sparked something inside you, as I know it did with me, be sure to head over to Ayush's website, check out the book. He is kind and generous in sharing his knowledge and information. So take advantage of it. Learn, grow in your knowledge and experience. Check out his podcast. I will make sure and link it to this video for more conversations that he's sharing his knowledge. Like you said, just to be in service to humanity. We all need more of that. So if you're looking to stay grounded and resilient while navigating your own transformation, uh, head over to my website. I am here to be of service to people as well. I provide tons of free resources to help people to find their happiness and whatever that is. And so again, Ayush, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I loved this conversation. It was so insightful and valuable to me, as a human, as a person, as a mother, as a grandmother, in my relationships with my partner, with the world. So thank you. I really appreciate this, your time, for coming here and sharing this information with us.
Thank you for having me.